Welcome to the Under 8 podcast, a 3 times per week college basketball show brought to you in under 8 minutes. At the time of recording, it is early on Saturday, March 23rd, 1:28 a.m. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, Kentucky goes down in the first round. The rest of the SEC struggles, and the 5 versus 12 continues to be a nightmare for the 5 seed. It's all right now on the Under 8 podcast. Josh Doering here with me. Josh, a roller coaster of a season for Kentucky in a lot of ways ends with an 80-76 loss to number 14 seed Oakland. It was the Jack Golke show. It was the Trey Townsend show. And John Calipari's Wildcats come up way short in the NCAA tournament once again.
Can we start by showing Oakland some respect?
Absolutely.
I feel like we are talking about collectively talking about this as if this is some incomprehensible program altering defeat for Kentucky, like a 1 seed losing to a 16 or something. We both said after the conference tournament, if Trey Townsend gets going, now Jack Golke did something he will probably never do again in his life. But we said this team can beat somebody. I feel like we just need to put this in context first. This is not as shocking as I feel like at least some people are making it out to be. And as I'm sure you're going to highlight here, when you put a super experienced team with the longest tenured head coach in the country against a bunch of freshmen, these kind of things can happen.
Yeah, I think one, I mean, I was pretty stunned by everybody hopping on the Kentucky bandwagon when the bracket came out anyways. It's like we just decided that the team that didn't play defense and was a roller coaster all season was just a lock to go to the Elite Eight all of a sudden, which didn't make a ton of sense to me. And when you dig a little bit deeper, I mean, Jack Golke making 10 of 23s is quite a feat, but he made the second most 3-pointers in the entire country this year. So it's not exactly like he's not a confident 3-point shooter.
And they did do a good job guarding them.
No, you'll be stunned to hear that the sub 100 defensive KenPom team didn't do a good job defending the 3-point line. And then you add the fact that there's high major players like Rocket Watts. There's conference player of the years like Trey Townsend. Like, to suggest that that was a truly baffling thing to have happen, I think it's just incorrect. And you can say that hindsight is 2020, but all of these things together, it's not. I just refuse to believe it's the most shocking thing in the world.
Yeah. Here's what did stun me. If you would have told me that Oakland wins this game, I would have said sure. If you would have told me that Oakland won this game in large part because Reed Sheppard had an awful night, that would have been harder for me to wrap my head around. Of all of the question marks and things I was not confident in with Kentucky, and yes, I did pick him to go to the Final Four, no farther than that. You know that's a big distinction for me. The one thing that I had confidence in was Reed Sheppard. And all of the things that Reed Sheppard has done all season, the opposite happened in this game. He turned the ball over, didn't make shots, didn't look confident, wasn't controlling their offense. And then, I mean, you pair that with DJ Wagner being a non-factor. Rob Dillingham was not great either. And basically you had Antonio Reeves trying to carry the guard position for a team that's built around guards. And when Oakland is playing well and Jack Golke is shooting the lights out and Trey Townsend is doing what he needs to do in the second half to kind of seal the deal, a team that knows how to play these close games against high major opponents, you're in trouble. The other thing I want to get to here, and I want your thoughts on this, because of course the conversation is about Calipari, and now it's all, do they need to fire him to move forward? They did go to a 10-year stretch, 9 NCAA tournament appearances. Yes, there was the NIT season where they lost to Robert Morris. And I know it's 1 win in 4 tournaments now. But in the first 10 years of Calipari, they lost twice in those 9 NCAA tournaments before the Elite Eight. They had 7 Elite Eights in there, a national championship. And then things started changing. And the last couple of seasons, obviously, they built around Oscar Tshiebwe. You and I were both kind of the same mindset of that is not a formula for NCAA tournament success. All of that got scrapped this season. So how are we viewing this if those things don't happen? Because to me, you can't put them together. I mean, you can in the sense that, yes, this is Kentucky again coming up short in the NCAA tournament. But all of the stuff you wanted Calipari to do, he did. This is a completely different offense. It's built around guards. It's a much more It's a much more modern version. It's the kind of offense that got everybody excited all season. And now we're acting like the sky is falling because they lost one basketball game to a good high major team. Not you in particular, because you've been very consistent that you just don't buy Kentucky. You can't just ride the roller coaster this way. Again, collective view. I get so frustrated with this that everybody jumped on Kentucky and now we're going to pile on Calipari. The other part of this, before I wanted to hear your thoughts, if you are focused in terms of should Kentucky make a change, if your focus is on winning NCAA tournament games and national championships, that decision should have been made before this game. Because, as we've mentioned before, that is not his goal. If you ask John Calipari, he did his job this year. Why? Because Rob Dillingham's in the conversation to go number 1 overall in the draft, and Reed Sheppard's going to be a lottery pick. That is what he is trying to do above all else. You don't win national championships very often with freshmen. That's ultimately his philosophy. He will take talent over anything else every single day. This game should not change anything because that was true 12 months ago, 24 months ago, 36 months ago. That's what you got when you got Calipari. I just don't understand why this game changes anything.
What are you upset about? Are you upset about people deciding that this is the last straw?
Yes.
I mean, I don't think John Calipari. I think it's silly to pay somebody that much money who isn't interested in winning basketball games first and foremost. I think it's silly, and I think year in and year out, he's shown that he doesn't really care.
And that's my point: is that is not something new coming out of this game.
No, but I mean,
and that's right. That's a very valid opinion to hold. My point is, you should have had that conversation when things were not going great the last couple of seasons, because it's not going to change. That's his philosophy. We don't need another NCAA tournament loss with a bunch of freshmen to tell us that.
I mean, I guess, but they also just lost to Oakland. Like, I'm not sure that you should be surprised that this is how people are reacting to this.
I'm not surprised by it. I'm just frustrated by it.
I mean, if Kentucky was really that upset, then I'm just not sure that I think that people blow out of proportions the Kentucky to Calipari relationship. I don't think Kentucky actually cares, because what do they do every single year? They sell out that building over and over and over and over and over again.
And send, what was it, 70% he said of their scholarship players to the NBA.
So I mean, we'll see, but until like Calipari will be done with Kentucky before Kentucky is done with Calipari.
I think you're right about that. Yeah, just to me, this has to be viewed without everything else that's happened, because this is not last season's team. If he hadn't changed anything, then that's a different conversation. Now, you can say, look, he changed everything and it still didn't work. And that's where you and I kind of were at the beginning of the season, is if this doesn't work, you've got a major problem, because he's going back to what he does. But it did work, because a bunch of people picked him to go to the Final Four, me included, and a bunch of people picked him to win the national championship. They had a really good season. Ultimately, to me, this was about the guards not showing up outside of Antonio Reeves. Calipari only has so much control over that.
And I would argue that that's everybody else's mistake because we know that freshmen don't win NCAA
Yeah,
tournaments, and
right,
people still thought it was a good idea to pick them to go to the Final Four and win national championship. Not sure what you want.
right, right. This is what you're getting.
Kentucky was not the only team out of the SEC to struggle. Florida, Auburn, Mississippi State shown the door by Michigan State,
Colorado,
Oregon. Say that again.
Colorado for Florida.
I didn't say Florida. I said
Oh,
Mississippi State.
yeah,
Mississippi
sorry,
State
sorry.
shown the door by Michigan State. And South Carolina was the victim of a really impressive individual performance against Oregon. It hasn't been a great 2 days for the SEC.
No, the top 4 seeds undefeated outside of SEC teams. That's not a great place to start, with Auburn also losing to Yale. I mean, John Pouladakis was fantastic. Auburn had all kinds of chances to win that game. Still couldn't make the plays. The guards were an issue. That was my concern with this team. As much as I love Janai Broom, I just didn't see how you get that deep into. Now, did I think they'd beat Yale? Yeah. But they just don't have the guards to make a deep run. I think that was one of the things we learned here is not that we learned, but was reinforced, is that guards win in March. Then you've got the Florida thing where, I mean, they're not guarding anybody, but they do rally. Clayton hits the big shot to tie the game, and then they immediately give up a game winner to KJ Simpson. And like you mentioned, Jermaine Couisnard comes back and just drops 40 on his old school.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'll say here is, one, like I do every season, these things happen. This doesn't mean the SEC was bad. The SEC was really good this year. Not as good as the Big 12, but really good. But if we're going to rip the Big 10, again, collective we, as much as I despise that conversation, well, some of that needs to be, if we're going to keep doing this, it's not just the Big 10 this happens to. I just want to go to the Big 10 for a little bit, but this doesn't, if Tennessee had lost, and Kentucky and Auburn and Alabama, where you're going, okay, can anybody from the SEC that's left make a run? Then maybe we have a different conversation. But Tennessee is just fine. Alabama scored a bazillion points. There are still very good SEC teams out there. This is just, it seems like there's a conference every year where this happens. The Big Ten seems to have the reputation. I know it's partially because they haven't won a national championship since 2000. But this year it's the SEC. And so now you're looking at the Tennessees and Alabamas to kind of keep this thing going.
Yeah, I feel pretty validated right now because I wasn't in on South Carolina or Kentucky or Florida or Auburn or any of them. And for some reason, the SEC and a lot of their teams was a KenPom darling this year.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of teams that I just didn't feel like passed the eye test for a top 10 KenPom team. And just didn't communicate that to me. And like you said, it doesn't mean that the SEC didn't have good teams in it this year, but I don't know. I mean, Auburn was 4th in adjusted efficiency. 4th.
Wow.
Tennessee is 7th. It's Auburn that's 4th.
Yeah. And Tennessee is so very clearly the best team in this conference.
Right. So it's yeah, like you said, we don't need to use the NCAA tournament to make sweeping declarations about those teams, but kind of one right after the other. And, thankfully Tennessee took care of business and really put St. Peter's down early and looked strong doing it. And because this could have really been bad. It's not like they didn't play some fun games. They just pretty much across the board didn't come out on the right end of them.
And the common theme with some of these teams, and I guess you throw Alabama in there too, but when you talk about Florida, you talk about Alabama, you talk about Kentucky, they can't guard. That has to be part of this too. Right. Florida lost a toss-up game between two teams scoring 100 points. But there is a set of very good teams in this conference that are one-dimensional. And that's what sets Tennessee apart, is that Tennessee can actually beat you with defense. But that has to be part of the conversation here too, is that as much as you might love Florida's guards and as much as you might love what Kentucky can do offensively or what Alabama can do offensively, they're not good defensive teams. They are bad defensive teams.
Mm-hmm.
You can, and I believe you can win multiple games in the NCAA tournament being a bad defensive team. But the step from 2 to 4, you've got to be great offensively consistently, which I did think Kentucky was capable of. And to get from 4 to 6, you can't do it when you're that bad defensively. You cannot win a national. And we say this every year. If you're not, top 21, 22 defensive team, you're not winning the championship. That's what history says. And these teams weren't even close.
Nope. 5 versus 12. Not exactly kind to the 12 seed, specifically tonight on Friday night. James Madison, 72, Wisconsin, 61, and James Madison pretty much looked like the better team for 40 minutes.
Yep.
I don't really care about the whole was James Madison misseeded. I don't really care. They look like the better team against Wisconsin tonight. Yeah,
sure did. I mean, Wisconsin needs its offense to be good. They're not what they usually are defensively, and they were not good offensively in this game. Turn the ball over left and right. Like you said, James Madison was pretty much in control from start to finish. And this one, you got the SEC teams right. This is the one I immediately looked at the bracket, and the first thing I said was James Madison's winning this game. So this is the one that I feel like I got right. Partially just because Wisconsin, I know they got to the Big Ten tournament final, but collectively over the last month and a half, or even you can stretch it beyond that, they haven't been good. This is a very good James Madison team that has now, I've got the numbers right, more wins over Big Ten opponents on neutral / opposing teams' venues than they do losses to teams not named Appalachian State.
Mm-hmm.
They're really good. And yes, just how good, how do you seed them? The idea of we keep adding more high major teams to the tournament, and that seems where everybody wants us to go, and it's going to leave teams like James Madison out. All that's important. Not a conversation for today. They're a very good team. Impressive performance. Glad to see them continue.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing in the world when people on Twitter decide that they're going to go to bat for Wisconsin and they're getting a tough 12 seed matchup in the first round. It's like, you know what? Wisconsin was like in the driver's seat for a top 3 seed on like January 15th and then imploded. Like they were
pushing for a 1.
They played Purdue as the number 6 team in the country and ended up as a 5 seed. Like that's nobody's fault but Wisconsin's. And if you don't want to play a team that can beat you on a lot of days, then you have to finish stronger than Wisconsin did. And they puttered out to the finish line. And as a result, you get to play a team like James Madison in the first round. That's what you get.
Yeah. And the other part of this for James Madison real quickly too is I would maybe have a little more sympathy with the seeding discussion had Michigan State actually had a really good season. Right? That win just doesn't mean what it might have at that moment in time.
Sure.
So you look at the quality of wins, and I always like to flip it and say, okay, so how many teams could go do what James Madison did with James Madison's schedule? Obviously not a bazillion. They're a very good team. But there were plenty of other teams that went into the Breslin Center and won as well.
Hmm.
So, they should be one of the most difficult opponents when you start getting into those double-digit seeds and start getting into the automatic qualifiers and things like that. They should be in the tournament. And they're going to get their opportunity, and they're going to win some of them because they're a good basketball team.
Dukes versus Duke in the
right.
second round. That'll be fun. Last but not least, also in the 12 versus 5, St. Mary's 66, number 12 seed Grand Canyon 75. The Lopes, led by Tyron Grant Foster and company, getting the job done in St. Mary's, having a pretty lackluster offensive performance, which is when you look back at the tournament teams they played this year, lackluster offensive performances was kind of the name of the game for them, outside of maybe playing Gonzaga, and it kind of felt like that again today.
Yeah. You could just tell this was a different level of talent that they were facing and just a different level of size and physicality. This Grand Canyon team, they are not small. They are long, they're athletic, they are difficult to deal with. And that starts with, and you talked about this before with Ty and Grant Foster. Whether he's an NBA player or not, he looks and operates like a high major player at the very least. Right. He looks like a future pro, wherever that may be. This Grand Canyon team is legit, and Graham Foster showed up, did his thing. Gabe McLaughlin was great on the boards, imposing his will on both ends of the floor, making some blocks and defensive plays. Seemed like he grabbed every important rebound, hit some free throws, scored some points. Their stars delivered in a way that St. Mary's didn't. I mean, those three starting guards were 9 of 35 from the floor.
Yeah.
You're not beating Grand Canyon with that. They did kind of fight their way back into the game a little bit, but also this team is not built to play from behind. Obviously, Grand Canyon got to set the terms of this game. They got to play at their tempo for the most part, got some turnovers to continue to allow them to get out in transition. It was an impressive performance, and I did kind of over exaggerate their seeds when we were talking about this before in terms of what their previous seeds were. I'd forgotten that they were 15 the first time, but this was coming. It was only a matter of time before Bryce Drew won a game at Grand Canyon. So congratulations to them. And the other thing I want to throw out there too, with these two teams in particular, get ready for more of this. Because to me, if there are on the East Coast and West Coast two schools to identify as kind of emerging powers at the mid-major level that are going to start causing headaches for high major teams, not saying they're going to become Gonzaga, but right, that St. Mary's, the mid-majors that you just treat as a high major because you know of that caliber, it's these two. With the money, the backing, the student bodies, the alumni network, these two schools collectively, and especially in men's basketball, are coming. And so it's kind of fitting that they both got their wins on the same day, and I fully expect to see more of this moving forward with these two. You have not heard the end of James Madison or Grand Canyon, even if they both lose in the next round.
James Madison gets Duke, Grand Canyon gets Alabama. That could be one of the more fun matchups of the round of 32. Josh, anything else that you want to get to before we get out of here?
Purdue beat a sweet 16 seed. Thank goodness.
Dude, it is completely unbelievable that they lost to a 16 seed last year. Like truly unbelievable. Yeah. Like I don't know. I don't know what Matt Painter said to Zach Edey before the game today, but like 30 and 20. Like, are you kidding me?
He scored the first 4 points or something. I went, oh, they're gonna be okay. I know it was within striking distance at halftime, but yeah, he wasn't about to let that happen again.
They cruise. They cover the 26.5 with a walk-on 3-pointer right at the very end. It's truly unbelievable that a similar version of that team. This is a better team, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But that a similar version of this team lost to a 16 seed a year ago.
Yep.
Because this year's team is a better team, but it's not night and day different the way that like Virginia's offensive like creativity and explosiveness was night and day different from the year that they lost to a 16 seed to the following year.
Yeah. Yep. And we got the other thing I'll throw out there too, we got some fun coaching rematch historical things going on here. Rick Barnes against Texas, Dana Altman against Creighton.
Sure.
Looking forward to both of those. That's going to be fun.
Indeed. Any last thoughts?
Impressive comeback from the Iowa State women. 20 points down, get their win to advance. That's about all I got. It is late.
Sure. It is late. let's get out of here. Under 8 pod. I suppose for Saturday, March 23rd, even though the spirit is for Friday, March 22nd, it's 1:53 a.m. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. Follow the Under 8 pod on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. We will be back here again on Sunday evening. Until then, take care.